Hello everyone, and welcome to the October edition of the OpenLineage TSC meeting, the monthly OpenLineage TSC meeting. I will be our MC for today's meeting. Just as a reminder to everyone, these meetings are being recorded and archived on our wiki and uploaded to YouTube by Shiri. Thank you for volunteering to do that. So if you wanted to say something that you regret, too bad.
No, what he means is let us know and we'll cut that out because we don't want anyone to get in trouble for saying something that maybe they realize they shouldn't have.
No, it's on Shiri. Sorry. I'm just kidding. So we start every meeting with a quick roll call. So I'm going to call out people on the screen and ask for you to say hello, introduce yourselves to the rest, especially if this is your first time joining this meeting. So first person on my screen is Tomasz.
Hi, I'm Tomasz. I work at Getting Data as a data engineer, and I'm a committer at OpenLineage.
Thank you, Tomasz. Leo, you're next.
Leo Godin. I'm a data engineer at New Relic, working on data pipeline observability and hoping to adopt OpenLineage there.
Nice meeting you, Leo. Thank you for joining. Julian.
Hello, I'm Julian. I'm a principal engineer at Datadog, and I'm the project lead for OpenLineage.
Gabe.
Hi, I'm an engineering manager at Datadog, working on data observability and OpenLineage and some of our in-house and external products.
Thanks, Gabe. Maciej.
Hey, I'm Maciej Lubowski. I work at Getting Data on OpenLineage for quite a bit of time now, and has been in quite a bit of those meetings. Hello to everyone.
Nice meeting you, Maciej. Daniel.
Sorry, was that me?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Dan or Daniel, founder and CEO of Bearing Node Data and Analytics Advisory, and we work with clients implementing data and information observability on products that implement OpenLineage standards. That's what I mean.
Thank you. Shiri.
I'm Shiri Cabral. I'm a product manager for data lineage from ETL tools and OpenLineage at Calibra, where we're in the middle of a private beta for that. And I'm also on the technical steering committee.
Thank you, Shiri. Jens.
Hey there, I'm Jens Faulk. I'm an engineering manager at Google and responsible for Dataplex and BigQuery lineage capabilities. And we happen to have an OpenLineage API and very interested in where the community is going. Nice to meet you.
Thank you, Jens. Good to see you. All right, folks, off screen, Pavel.
Hello, I'm Pavel. I'm software engineer at Getting Data and astronomer. I'm working with OpenLineage for quite a bit of time, and I'm super excited to be here and see so many people. Thank you.
Excited to see you here, Pavel. Adrian.
You can't see me, so why are you excited then?
I can always see you, Pavel. That's what you don't know.
This is definitely your very excited voice. We can all tell.
Adrian.
Hi all, my name is Adrian. I'm a software engineer at Datadog, working in the field of data observability, I would say. Yeah.
Thank you for joining, Adrian. James. Okay. If you would like to say hello later, James, you're very welcome to. And last but not least, Mandy. Good to see you again.
Hello, nice to be back actually. I normally have another meeting at this time, but I was able to join, which I'm delighted to do. So I'm Mandy Chessel. I am the leader of the Ajuria project, which is a sister project at the LFAI and Data organization. So I spend my time working on OpenLineage integration between Ageria and OpenLineage, but also with other things. I'm particularly working with Databricks on trying to bring Unity Catalog into the OpenLineage camp.
Ooh. Looking forward to hearing more about that, Mandy. Well, I'll go last. My name is Harel. I'm part of the OpenLineage project team. I work at Datadog as an engineering manager, working on APM stuff. It is great to see everyone. We have a really exciting agenda, so I'll get to it. First off, as a reminder, here are all the communication channels. There is also a pigeon mail address. I will send that later. A few quick announcements. So next month, we will be hosting an OpenLineage meetup in New York City. Save the date, November 19th. And I'll talk more about that soon. We would also like to welcome a new consumer of OpenLineage data. Funny enough, it's the company I work for as well, Datadog, and I think you'll hear from Gabe about it as well soon. Very excited for that. I will quickly go through the recent release. I think we've had one since our last monthly meeting. And then we'll go into presentations by two observability companies, Datadog and New Relic, about event ingestion and OpenLineage tagging facet. And then at the end, if there's time, I know there's a bit of a backlog of issues to discuss, so hopefully we get to that as well. Please pardon my sore throat. Hopefully I'm understandable enough. All right, so announcement. So we'll be hosting a meetup in Datadog's HQ in New York on November 19th. That's a Tuesday. It'll be probably around 6 p.m. If anyone is in New York around that time, please reach out and let us know. Julian, you're already on the hook because I know you're here. But yes, it would be great to see more folks here. And if you have ideas for presentations, would love to see that as well. All right, jumping on to releases. So we've had one release since 1.23. I tried to group things into categories. Hopefully the groupings make sense, but Jakub contributed multiple configuration options for both the Python and Java clients, supporting adding support for composite transport in the Java client that was already there in the Python client, being able to configure things via environment variables, both for Java and Python. That also includes support for custom HTTP headers in Python. Then we've had support for extension for table extended sources in the Spark extension interface. Two new transport options for two cloud vendors, GCP and AWS. So we have Dataplex transport and GCS transport in the Java client, and S3 transport in the Java client as well. This is something we talked about in the last TSC meeting, but we've added support for column level lineage. We've changed the way that full dataset dependencies are being represented, so check that out. And lastly, this is actually more of a bug fix, I imagine, but in the OpenLineage client and transports are now auto-closable, so probably preventing a bunch of lingering threads going on. Good job. Thank you for doing that. And big thank you for all the contributors. We would not be here talking about this work if it weren't for you. So on behalf of the community, thank you for continuing to contribute. And good question, Maciej. TBD, I'll announce it on Slack. All right, so I'm going to leave time for the more important and interesting parts of this, which will be our presentation. So I'm going to hand it off to Gabe to talk about opening event ingestion. And Gabe, please feel free to let me know when to move on to the next slide.
Cool. Sounds good. Hi, I'm Gabe Ochoa. Some of y'all I've met before, some of y'all I've worked with. But I work on data observability at Datadog. And so that's a combination just a quick understanding of what that means for us. It's a combination of how these events could possibly be used in our customer products and for our customers, as well as how we use them internally. We've been kind of approaching both topics and working on it both sides, which I'll talk about here a little bit. Yeah, I've been a Datadog a year now. Actually, my anniversary was yesterday, just as a fun fact. But I'm based out of Brooklyn, New York here, our New York City office. But the team's pretty globally distributed, which is nice. A combination of both data folks and product folks, which is a good combination for kind of what we're doing, and yeah, looking forward to kind of help the standard move forward and see how we can contribute and help. And this is kind of the first step of doing that. So Raul, if you want to go to the next slide. So how we've been approaching this, and please jump in with questions as we go, because we'll be looking at some schema things in a second, and how we're kind of mapping some of the data in the spec. And I'd love to have some discussion there. Happy to be wrong, happy to be right, happy to have comments on it. But we're kind of starting our OpenLineage journey internally by instrumenting some of our internal systems as well. We have a custom workflow orchestration in-house, but do use dbt pretty heavily. And so that's kind of where we're starting internally with dbtol and just wrapping it. There's a huge need internally to gain visibility into failures impacting delivery of our internal data. We're a data heavy company. You can think of us as a giant data lake with a UI strapped on top of it, right? It's not too much more than that. We have a bunch of smart data scientists and other folks that use the data to do really amazing things for our customers, and that data is sometimes late. That data is sometimes transformed incorrectly. All the normal things that y'all hear about with people using OpenLineage to observe those systems. So we had that pain internally pretty concretely, and then we were also hearing from customers that are using OpenLineage that they already have it integrated in their Spark clusters. They're already using it with Airflow. Like, how do we? They're already using other Datadog products. Can they bring that data? Can they look at it next to all of their other stuff in their dashboards? It's another beautiful source of enrichment for a lot of our customer systems. So we're kind of hearing both, and we said, okay, well, how do we start? And the first step, if you go to the next slide, is dog fooding. I mean, as our name suggests, we like to dog food pretty heavily in-house. We monitor Datadog with Datadog, which creates some fun circular infrastructure dependencies that some very smart people handle. But we started by saying, okay, can we just wrap dbt and start ingesting that into our APM product? So this is a span. I just wanted to show you quickly our flame graph, and for a span, if folks are unfamiliar, APM collects traces and builds those off of spans, and individual spans are structured events. Similar to the OpenLineage spec, they have a start and an end, and they kind of give you this full, or they give you this full time window with other attributes, tags, or facets, right? So the first thing we did was said, okay, how do we intake this? We looked at the spec, we looked at our spans, and we said, hey, these map pretty well. What if we just spun up a quick intake and service to take these events in from our internal systems and start displaying them, at least in our own product, for ourselves? So that's what you see here. This is actually the internal orchestration system. It's called Mortar, but this is a Mortar run with a couple of dbt jobs going. You can see that we're actually collecting the dbt metadata down at the bottom. The rest of I didn't include the rest of the span tags there, but they're mapped from the facets from the spec and both the job run fields and all the other fields we've kind of mapped for it. So Raul, if you go to the next slide, clicking on one of those, you can see as well we're maintaining that what we would call the trace context, or in this case, the parent context, so that we're actually getting the tracing all the way through the OpenLineage run events, and we can stitch them together in this way. So lots of different ways to visualize them, of course, but this was just kind of the first, okay, can we consume the data and is it working? I'm going to go next, Harel. The other big thing we were hearing, at least on the customer side, was an ask for Airflow and to actually pull in some of the Airflow OpenLineage data. And so this is maybe, sorry, one second. Sorry, I had to decline a call. This is one of the Airflow example jobs. If you've ever set up Airflow from scratch, you probably have seen this one. There's a lot of, a lot of good examples baked in. But this is us collecting OpenLineage data and ingesting it through this intake into our APM product as spans, and mapping again the job name, namespace, parent, source, etc. As well as there's more facets down below. So you can see the relationship, but then also the time, duration, exact time failures, everything you might want to see, or normally would see in kind of an APM span, in APM context. Or if you go to the next slide, just one more. So we're working on this event ingestion in kind of a preview or beta capacity for us soon for certain customers. Hopefully in the next couple of months or sometime in Q4, we're going to start working with customers to make sure it works for them, make sure they can send us data in an easy way from OpenLineage events in Airflow. And then DBT soon after that, but we're still dog fooding it internally. We don't use Airflow internally, so we couldn't start there, at least for us. We're mapping those events to spans. So you can see down below, I have that actual event mapping of where we started in the actual attribute for our spans, and then kind of what the actual OL attribute we're mapping to. I would love feedback on this if y'all think this is incorrect or other things should be mapped appropriately at some point. But yeah, the whole goal of it is to get it into the Datadog APM product, and then you can do all the things that Datadog is built to do as a platform: monitor, alert, etc. Build dashboards on the data, and have it co-located next to everything else you're monitoring.
Hello, Gabe. Can I ask a question?
Please.
Yeah. So maybe I missed this, but how coarse-grained are you going with the namespace? Because that's one thing we're never too sure about. Do we use it for each source, have a different namespace, or for each type of technology, or for, I don't know how you've been finding that?
Yeah, maybe could be. We actually had that debate a little bit internally, about exactly what it should be and what the namespace mapped to. Here we're mapping it to environment, and that's kind of where we're setting it because we found that it's oftentimes unique. That could be incorrect.
So is that like a tenant? Would be a tenant for you?
Yeah.
Or would that be like a test pod type environment?
Be a what? I missed the first.
Dev test pod. We've got a dev environment.
It would be more the latter. It'd be more like a dev test prod.
Okay, all right.
We are mapping it. We have looked at mapping some data sets that are in S3 that aren't necessarily Iceberg, but that are just in S3. And the namespace kind of becomes the key space there in some manner, is kind of the best way that we modeled it, but it was still not quite good. We haven't started down that direction too heavily yet. Does that answer your question?
It does. So it looks like it's very difficult to come up with a very concrete thing. So you've externalized it. Is that because it looks like it's a clickable link there?
It actually just goes to the spec. It actually just goes to the OpenLineage spec.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Julian.
There's possibly an option. I think you could put it in service instead of env environment, I think. That could be an option, like you put DAG name in both service and resource name, but if resource name is supposed to be more granular than service, like possibly the namespace could be there. But yeah, it's not, I don't think it's a clear cut.
Yeah, it didn't map perfectly to kind of how we've heard from things. I mean, we build with our customers very closely, so we have a couple partner customers that are going to try this soon, and I'm looking forward. I will definitely ask them that exact question, and we can bring it back to you and see if it makes sense to them. Maybe it doesn't make sense, and maybe they think it should be something else. But I can definitely let y'all know when we talk to some consumers, some folks that are actually using it to monitor their systems.
I wanted to ask, are you connecting in any way spans and traces that read and write to the same datasets?
So it's something we're working on right now. Initially, no. But in the case, there's a pretty common case of Airflow orchestrating Spark tasks, right, in Spark applications. And we already have a product that's data jobs monitoring that monitors Spark applications separately from OpenLineage, but we do want the connection maintained on that. So we are working on making sure that context is propagated to other information and other data we're collecting. Both through, I mean, you can see here, we're taking the run ID and the root run ID, and we're kind of, it's very similar to the span and trace IDs. And so we're able to kind of preserve that and connect it to other events we're collecting as well. So working on it, but don't have any concrete, anything concrete kind of done yet.
Cool. More questions?
Yeah. Just on that last thing, has there been any discussion on coming up with like a one-way hash to generate run IDs so that different clients could come up with the same run ID for the same service?
I believe that's how it works in Airflow, right?
Yes.
In Airflow, but we haven't started. Like, go ahead, Maciej, if you want to talk more about this.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, for example, you want to have a deterministic ID because you want to generate it for start and end event, and you can't really know where they end up, right? It's not like you can store it in memory because, for example, in Airflow you have asynchronous tasks that run one part of the job on one machine and then can run the other part on another. So you need to have a way to generate deterministically run ID in Airflow. I think what we try to specify is that it's valid UUID and generate the IDs in a way that makes sense for a particular integration. So if you have something else in mind, should we specify it more or do something else?
Nothing more than,
let us know.
you know, having a deterministic way would probably make a lot of things easier.
Yes, but does it make sense to have a deterministic way that's not tied to a particular integration? Because it can be just tied to something like time or host time. I think at this point it's deliberately underspecified, but I think it can change at some point if we figure something out, really.
I think at some point in Spark, we had some work done to improve UUIDs so that they are monotonically increasing. And this was pretty helpful so that, you know, whenever someone generates UUID later on, it's easier to store in database and provide some indexes in such tables. And perhaps that is something that could have been added to the spec because it's only Spark implementation. And yeah, perhaps this could have been done to the spec. Thank you.
Thanks, Leo. Definitely a good topic. Yeah, one thing I'm thinking about is, in general, do we want to think about how OpenLineage and OpenTelemetry maybe align, and these types of mappings? Do you want to generalize them in the open source or not? Just kind of some thoughts I've had there.
I think, Carol, it's the good moment to start the doc, and we should discuss that.
Sounds good. Sounds like Maciej has volunteered to start up a doc, so thank you.
No.
I'm kidding, of course. But if anyone else is interested in this, we can definitely start a working group around that. Okay. Any more questions, feedback for Gabe and team? All right, awesome. Well, Gabe, thank you for sharing.
Thank you. Yep, happy to. And I'll hopefully be a little bit more of a regular face at these meetings every month. My email is also on the first slide, should you have any other thoughts or want to get in touch afterwards.
You have a really cool email. It's go@Datadog, so I'm caught on to that handle.
The first thing you have to do when you start join a new company is make sure that all of the namespaces that are flat, that you have, have your name, have your alias, including emails, Slack handles,
I don't seem to have that issue.
No, yeah. I normally don't either, but then this was, much larger company, so.
Some of us here.
Also, two-letter email addresses are not compliant with the spec for email.
Well,
Really?
also Twitter handles are not compliant, and somehow some of us on the call here have a 2-character Twitter handle. I will not name names.
Maybe we should start a club, start a separate club. It's just two-letter handles.
All right. Leo, are you ready to go next?
Yeah.
All right, same drill as before. Let me know when you want me to switch slides.
Okay. Go ahead and switch. So there was a discussion on what I'm calling arbitrary metadata. The pieces of data that aren't in the spec, but you want to collect. And there's a lot of different examples like airflow tags. You might see something identifying a team, an environment. You might identify something as part of a greater pipeline, for instance. In DBT, they have tags and models and tests, really any resource. But then they have this concept of meta, where you can put a dictionary of whatever you want. There's examples of how I use it, right? So in some cases, it's observability, who to notify in Slack, who owns something, which team. And then there's messages to downstream automation. If a test fails and we've configured it, we'll go and collect that data in Snowflake or whatever and put that into New Relic for alerting business teams, things like that, right? Snowflake or just databases in general, you might have something like PII or public. So there's a lot of different use cases. There's a lot of different methods. And I think it would be good to figure out a generalized way that we can do this so that consumers know how to deal with it rather than using additional properties and extended facets and things like that. Go to the next slide. Okay, so when we think of columns and tagging the fields in our schema facets, it's actually different than the other use cases. So we'll save that for last. But the first thing I'm proposing is a tag facet. And this could apply to jobs, runs, data sets, maybe the data quality facets. And really just a list of key values, I think, is probably the best way to do it. It handles your general purpose tag where you could say PII equals true, where you might have just a single token, you'll have true or something like that. And then it also handles things like identifying a team or an environment. The tag could be an array of key value pairs, or it could just be an object where the keys are represent the keys and the values represent the values. I'm not sure I don't have a strong opinion on either one, really just that there should be some concept of multiple key values. Any questions on that or comments?
I think the one that I had on the GitHub still applies, which is sometimes we need to distinguish between like user-defined metadata and metadata that comes out from some integration. And I think many consumers would probably want to know whether it's like some arbitrary tag from like somebody tagged an Airflow tag, or is it something that user is selected to send? Because, for example, it determines their environment, right? Which is not something that we don't. No, I'm not sure if that solves this problem, or maybe you should consider that this is only a solution for those arbitrary tags, and the user, the like integration defined stuff should be in some other place, right? I think it just would be a good idea to have this part defined.
Yeah, and even further, in some cases, it might be difficult to even determine, is this a user defined or an integration defined? Like, obviously, if it's in the integration code, or maybe, is that what you're saying? So let's say the DBT integration, it's pulling some information automatically. That's the stuff you want to be separated? Or is it that there's very specific aspects of an integration that would have the kind of thing that you'd create a custom facet for?
Maybe it's just that there's additional context around those tags, right? If you have like Airflow tag tags, then you probably want to know that it's not just an arbitrary tag, but it's tagging this data set, right? Or this tag or something.
Yeah, okay.
Or in case of DBT tags, right? You want to maybe have the information that it's pulled by DBT from somewhere, right? Rather than just set up statically.
Right. So if you set up like an environment variable that sets a tag, then that could that be handled with the same? Well, I guess that could be the same facet with multiple properties, or it could be separate, like integration tag facet and I don't know, user tag facet.
I don't have a specific solution in mind. Maybe other than like if we maybe this tag facet should be only for those arbitrary tags, right? Then we can say that other information would be in like custom facets specified by user in some other way, or it would be some integration specific facet, or it would be some other maybe facet that is in the spec, but this tag facet is only just for those user defined tags, right? That's one solution, to not mix those two. Maybe we could tag the tag, but that's like, I think, not very good idea. I would love to hear other thoughts about this.
I think it's provenance on tags is a common problem, right? Like you get tags from different sources, right? And then you put them all in the same bag of tags. And then, where they're coming from is actually important in a bunch of cases, like whether it's been provided. So I think it makes sense to have something. I'm not sure what's the best solution, right? It's kind of so that it's nice to have something readable, right? That's easy to read without cluttering necessarily with a lot of metadata for tags. But maybe there's a balance. For example, for the DBT meta things, I would expect to have like a DBT custom facet that adds the meta information. And maybe in Airflow you also have a custom facet. So those tags, they show up there's an Airflow custom facet that will probably have, I think the tags, you can find them already, right? In that Airflow custom facet, so you find them there. The tag facet, I think it's overdue, right? We talked about this a couple of years ago, and we need to, it's definitely something that needs to be added. I don't have like, it's like we need to strike the right balance between like not too verbose of a definition, but at the same time being able to track some of that information.
And one thing is to not go overboard in the other direction. So if we have something that clearly is the same between different integrations, we should use standard facet that describes this, right? There's no point in like Airflow SQL facet and Spark SQL facet if they just describe the SQL of the job that we just executed.
Yeah, maybe we can just have like multiple list of tags, right? Like tags are key values, and they can be multiple name lists that track the provenance of the tag. And if someone wants to treat them as one bag, it should just merge them all. And if they don't, we should just can look at one specifically, and that'd be it.
Okay, so like, for example, in this schema, you have an array of tags, and then in that array, you have a bunch of objects, for instance, like you have a DBT meta underscore tag or something like that. And then that's pointing to the list of key values. So you get the provenance from the parent key. Is that something like that?
Yeah, something like that. I think
maybe have a list of tags and possible some like key value in an object and then some additional information, maybe. That would also work, I think.
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing, right? It's just structured a little bit different. I like that idea. So you have some sort of provenance field somewhere that says this is where it came from. And then the consumers can use that or not use that. It doesn't matter, right? It's up to, you know, whatever your use case is.
Yes, so if you have multiple sources of tags, then you use it, I think. And if you don't, maybe you don't need to. Right?
Yep. And then there should be like a really strong, at least naming convention for how you would set that provenance.
Yes.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Any other questions, comments? All right, maybe
Thank you for doing this.
Oh, you're welcome.
Sorry, yes, I think it's great that someone's pushing this so that we define this better, more formally.
Yeah, it's not hard to get me to give my opinion. It's hard to get me to stop. So
keep opening PRs. It's fine.
I will. If you can go to the next slide, we can look at tags and why they're different. The problem with columns is columns are not held. And when I say columns, it's really fields in the schema facets. They're not held in their own facet. One column is not equal to one facet. The column is an array of objects. And so you need a way to specify that a tag applies to that column. If you want to mark something as PII equals true, you need a way to do that. We had a lot of discussion on this, and I don't think we came to a common understanding. But if you go to the next slide, there's some options, right? On the top left, we could have, if we just keep the tags facet as we intended, or as we proposed earlier, you could have an optional third parameter of that tag and have it mark the column it applies to. From a readability standpoint, that seems awkward to me. So you could take that a step further and either create a separate tag facet for columns or have a second property in the tag facet that applies to columns. I guess if you're going to have a second property, you might as well just create a tag facet that's specific for schemas and tagging columns. And there is the potential to just add a tags field or something like that in the various schema related, or the various facets that hold lists of columns.
So has there been a discussion in the past about turning the column into a proper facet?
I don't know that. I'm pretty new here.
Yeah, just Julian
Though
would know.
it is a breaking change, and I just left it at that in my comments.
Fair.
We had a greater discussion, was it last week or this week, in a different meeting? I think it was last week. About tagging and whether it should be a facet or not. And the problem is with columns, the column itself isn't a facet. So
That's what I was. Sorry, that's what I said. I didn't say very well. No, I wondered whether in the past we'd had a discussion about whether to change the column into its own facet so that the tag facet would work and other things that you might want to attach to a column would be possible.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and that's and I do understand it's a breaking change, but it could be an alternative way of doing columns that would then stop, no longer require special treatment.
Right. I think it's an issue of, do we think something like this will come up in the future? And if so, we should break things now as opposed to later.
Yeah, or not even break it, just make it an alternative way of doing columns. So I suppose that does break the receivers if you switch, but it doesn't break the spec.
I don't like the alternative option, because then you force consumers to work with both forever, right?
Yes, true. Yeah.
We could add the notion of column facets in a somewhat forward compatible way, right? To just add an optional field somewhere, and it's just existing consumers would ignore it, and over time it would be added. So that could be a possibility. It's like, do we want to? The question is about making columns, right? Like a first class things. Right now we have data sets, inputs, outputs, job, and run, and columns come only in facets, right? They don't.
And it's really to do with addressability, and particularly if you're doing column level lineage and things. I think in the original spec, columns were just extra information, whereas they're now they are first class already, really, but if we've got column level lineage.
Yeah, we've also been considering that the definition of columns can be somewhat not necessarily one way to do it, right? Because you can have a schema facet, but depending if you have, I don't know, an Avro schema in a Kafka topic or columns in a database, you could describe your schema differently. Right? It's kind of the way you uniquely identify a column might be different.
What would be the advantage of having column as a separate facet?
Means you could have custom facets for each column. So as you grow, you might, so this tagging is a first example of where you want to attach a facet to an individual column. But there could be other data that you're capturing that is very specific to the column. Otherwise, you end up with arrays of things that have to be mapped to the column definition itself.
Yeah. One key advantage of this, in my opinion, is that like now we have a standard way of identifying the column, right? Like right now, I don't think we have standardized, right? Like we identify them in column level lineage, we identify them in a schema facet. So there's a couple facets where we refer to those names. And the spec doesn't have a central place that says this is how you identify a column, right? And so if we do that, I mean, we can define this independently of having column facets or putting them in other facets, but I think that's a key thing that would be useful.
It would be particularly where you can have multiple columns in quotes that have the same name. And so you're making up a namespace.
Mm-hmm.
If we
So
did,
yeah, so we have.
yes, I think we probably said that. Basically, so if we did have this as a proposal, we could do the tag facet in its simplest form, just something that you can attach to something, and then look at the column facet. Or do you think we need a solution now for tagging of columns?
I personally think they're separate. That the column one needs a lot more discussion, but the tag, that the concept of just being able to apply tags to a facet seems like a pretty common use case.
Yeah, I think it's really useful.
And
yes,
if we will introduce that to the spec, and we will introduce it in a way where it's not where it is compatible, then we would probably still want to find a way to attach tags to people using the existing way. So those might be completely decoupled from that aspect as well.
yeah, I would think so, because so one, we're already referring to columns in facets in ways, so we kind of have this mechanism already. I think it's more work, right? And more like getting to consensus to introduce a notion of column facet. And I'm guessing, Leo, you want to make progress now also on your project. So to me, it would be a good idea to have those two as parallel approach, right? Like anyway, we need a tag at the dataset level. And yeah, it sounds like a good idea to have a column facet as well. So do we want, are we feeling good about maybe pursuing both things in parallel?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. So I would think so, right? I think it's a good idea. I don't think it should be a blocker to, what Leo is trying to do.
So what's next?
Yes, so I think so you had a favorite option from this screen, right?
If you go up, you talk about for columns or for the general purpose facet
So for
tag?
the general purpose, we had the discussion. I think you're going to propose something based on what Maciej was saying, I was saying, and others were saying. I forgot.
Yeah, it really included the provenance of
Okay, yeah.
the particular tag.
So I would suggest you make a proposal. I don't know if we have an issue open yet or a PR, and we can look at adding.
We have a doc about this.
We have a doc, right? So we update the doc, and that can turn into like a PR.
Okay.
And we can review this. I think like from this discussion, it feels like I don't know, we're 90% there, right? So maybe there's a little bit more back and forth. And we see how to add this. For the column one, maybe we're less close to the final decision. But I mean, I
Well, I
agree
think
with
that
you.
there has to be a decision between new column a new column facet or some way to tag a tag that it applies to a column. Like that has to be decided whether we're going to have a new column facet, I think.
So I think what we were saying is in the current way things are done, you can add in dataset facet, you can add a way to say that the tag applies to a column, right? And we probably like add to the spec, clarify what's the standard way to refer to a column. And then I think we agreed to like push the column facet mechanism as a separate discussion to that, in addition to so that can be a follow-up to this, right? That's my understanding from this conversation. And if you want to push that forward as well, you said we can't stop you from having opinions. You're welcome. If that beyond the scope of what you wanted to do, it's okay too, right? Like we can.
No, that's fine. This isn't a big thing.
It's called nerd sniping, right? Like it's kind of like be careful, like, oh, you have opinions. We want opinions, like it's just like.
But you want PRs more.
Yes.
So next up, Leo, I can help you out with some on our process for creating proposals. At least we can get a first action item on.
Yeah, I think.
Thank you.
Yeah, adding tagging facet maybe doesn't necessitate a proposal. I think adding column facet mechanism definitely like is a proposal thing because we're iterating on the spec.
Makes sense.
Yeah. But definitely you would have an issue with the details of how the facet would work and what it's for in documentation.
Okay.
All right. Any more questions or comments on this topic? All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Leo, for bringing this proposal to everyone.
Welcome.
And presenting. So we have 4 minutes. I know that Pavel wanted to bring up a topic. I don't know, this might be too late in the meeting. Pavel, what do you think?
If it's the only item on the agenda, I would love to do this. Just to briefly introduce it, then to share a link to a document and let everyone comment on the document. Yeah. So there's still an issue with partitioning. So we don't support any partitioning description in the spec. And there are at least 3 things we would like to express for OpenLineage events. So one is to answer the question, is the dataset partitioned, and if so, in which way? The other question is, if the job is reading some data, is it reading any particular partitions? What subset of the dataset is it reading? And the third one is the output of the job. It's a common case that the job outputs just a single partition or just a few partitions, and we would love to express this fact. And I started creating the Google Doc just to, provide a proposal to answer those 3 questions. Perhaps you can share the link or I can share it later. And yeah, and the first one is how to describe that the dataset is partitioned. And yeah, the document contains some proposal of the partition dataset facet. And there are like 3 simple examples of what can happen. So the first one is assume our dataset is partitioned by 2 columns. In this case, we express it as a transforms, which are identity, and each it's just an identity on a single column. Yeah, the other example is that perhaps we do partition on a function of a certain field. And in this case, yeah, we use the description of the transform to specify how the transform looks like. And yeah, the most complex case that I was able to find out is, yeah, what if we partition based on the output of 2 functions and one takes 2 columns as input. Yeah, and this is something we would also like to express. I think it's not supported at the moment for Iceberg, but the Spark objects that I will look into the code look like they are designed in a way to support such scenarios. Yeah, so that's the first thing. The second thing is how to express that a subset of a dataset is being read, and I think this is like more general case. than partitioning. And we would like to express something which is, in a SQL world is where condition. We would love to express the where condition because actually it may be useful for someone on the backend side looking what does this job is really doing. It's just reading a tiny subset of a data set. And I think it's a really complex problem to express within the OpenLineage event the where condition clause. So I'm proposing something that can be extended in the future to meet some other requirements. But for now on, so my case is to, to solve the problem of a where condition where there's a combination of logical operators and the column names and some literals. So I'm introducing something like the binary field condition, which has the left and right nodes, and it can be or and conjunction, and also some literal comparison condition which takes the field name and the value and and says should be equal, greater than, less, greater than. What's the way of comparing those the field and the literal? And I believe this is something that, later on someone can come with some other condition and other ways to describe things. And for now, I would be able to solve this issue with, having just a few filters describing it. And we're out of time. Harel, can I get an extra minute from you?
Definitely.
Definitely. So the third thing is to describe what's the output of the data set, and perhaps just to mention the partitions that were updated. And for integrations like Spark, perhaps we could add some configuration entry for this. So if you know that your organization partitions data in a way that the business that column is added, then Spark should know we're handling such data set that, hey, actually it's not the real dataset name. The dataset name is just this part, and the other thing should be translated into the partition facet. And so that we have we modify the dataset name and add the partitioning facet. And I think I got 1 minute. Thank you for staying with me a minute longer. And I see you shared the link. If you have a comment now, please, I'm happy to hear it. And if you want to comment on the doc, I'm also happy to see
I think it's a great idea, and I think it's the right granularity. Like there's also like 3 different facets. One, like probably there's an input facet, what actual partition have been read, output facet, what actual partition have been written. And then there's a dataset facet that describe what's the partitioning scheme. And then there's even a fourth facet probably on the job or on the run that would be what's the definition of the features on the input partition, right? So there's I think that makes sense to me to have those things defined. And I think we're pretty close to something that, it's another thing that's overdue of defining partitioning in the OpenLineage spec. So I think that's great, and I'm looking forward to put comments in your doc. And I'm encouraging everyone to do so as well.
So we are 2 minutes over. So just to be mindful of everyone's time. Let's have the discussion async on Pavel's doc. We'll put it on the agenda for the committer meeting for next week. So if anyone would like to join that discussion, also please let me know and I'll add you to that discussion. Thank you for all the presenters for today. Thank you for bearing with my hoarse voice for this meeting. And thank you for all the committers and contributors. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.